Hello and welcome to Season 5, Episode 23 of Logicast, the AWS News podcast brought to you by Logicata. I'm Karl Robinson, CEO and co-founder of Logicata, and I'm joined today, as always, by Principal Cloud Engineer and a man who I heard refer to himself as reaching the melting point of a human, Jon Goodall. How are you doing today, Jon?
I have, in fact, melted. The melting point of the Southern Englishman is, I believe, 24 degrees Celsius.
Well, we're way beyond that then. Yeah, we're way beyond that. So,
I mean, I'm not in the office at the minute that I'm in. Office at home, right? It doesn't have air conditioning, but I've got a couple of portable units kind of dotted around the house, and I'm managing to keep that to about 24, 25 degrees. So I'm coping. Yes, I must admit, going for, and this is where I brag, that I've recently renewed my DevOps Pro exam at the weekend in a test center that didn't have air conditioning. We hadn't quite hit the sort of stupid temperatures because it was Saturday, but that was still warm.
Can you request an accommodation for that extra time if it's over a certain temperature? There is actually still no upper limit, is there? There's no upper limit for a working temperature. Your work environment can be too cold, but it can't be too hot.
There's actually no lower limit either. I googled
Isn't it?
this.
I thought it was.
No. I looked into this because one of the other things that, as regular listeners will know, is I'm kind of into my karate, and I'm an instructor with a local club and this kind of thing. And we're having this conversation around what is the point at which we say don't come in gi, come in t-shirts, water breaks versus just don't come. So I googled it, and there's no legislation on upper or lower limits for employers or anything like that. There's a lower guidance number, which is 16 degrees for office workers or 13 degrees for manual laborers working outside. But that's it. There's no rules, there's no legislation, that's just guidance, and there's no upper limit at all. Which is disappointing because otherwise my premises would be your problem.
Well, yeah, I don't know how that would apply in a home working environment. It's your house, not my office. Anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather, but I'm sure today's third-time returning guest, Stephen Woodard, may be able to tell us what the weather is like on the other side of the Atlantic. We are, of course, seeing it because football fans will know the World Cup is happening at the moment, and we've got those controversial hydration breaks halfway through each half. So football or soccer ball, as Americans call it, is now a game of quarters rather than halves. But anyway, great to have you back on again, Stephen. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Again, third time repeat offender over here.
So are you a fan of the soccer ball?
Typically, yes, but the last couple of weeks, just been so busy working on a couple different things. I haven't had a chance to really pay attention to it. I've been keeping up with a little bit, kind of like on the weekend for a little bit of time, but haven't been able to tune into it as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. Jon is not either, but I shall be watching the England game tonight just to see how they
I'm a fan of the news of the Scottish drinking Boston Dry.
Yes, I did hear an interview with a one of the Tartan Army, as they're known, discussing whether it was kilt weather or not in Boston at the moment. But anyway, Stephen, tell us what you've been up to since the last time you joined us as our guest.
Yeah, again, just a long-time enterprise architect, focusing on cloud governance and really just kind of helping customers with, emerging technologies. Recently, over the last year, I started a startup called Obligra Labs, and we basically do a lot of research and development for, we build AI governance frameworks. We just recently launched our first product. That product is called Verify. It's a system of record for AI-assisted decisions that really preserves the context, evidence, and records that the organizations need those whenever the decisions are reviewed later. So it records the AI output, it reports the prompt, it reports the output, and it does all that stuff on a distributed ledger that we actually host and provide for our customers. So very, very cool, very excited about that. We launched a white paper a couple months ago, and we just issued a press release this week. So very excited about that.
Cool. Yeah, I guess AI is making an awful lot of decisions nowadays, and there's going to come a point where we're going to need that traceability, I guess.
I might certainly have a look at that.
Yeah, it's making a lot more decisions on my behalf right now. Ultimately, we are retaining editorial control, but I'm speaking at a conference in Brighton on Friday about cloud decisions, and one of the threads within that panel discussion is going to be AI making decisions on where stuff goes, where it lands, that kind of thing, and just having that record, is I guess is going to become more and more critical, particularly in certain types of businesses. Are you seeing traction with that in particular industries? So,
healthcare, insurance are the two biggest ones I see right now. Finance is getting there as well too, but I don't think you see anything more of a push for it now in healthcare and in insurance. Just the AI adoption is happening so fast. And there needs to be, right, so there's now, even with the White House issuing out executive orders, that there needs to be more AI things being placed in doctors' hands. Clinicians, practitioners are using more and more of it. And anytime you're dealing with patients or anybody within healthcare and insurance, you're going to be dealing with things like auditing, compliance, regulatory. And if they get the decision wrong, so if a practitioner makes the wrong decision and the AI told them one thing, or they told them the wrong thing, that's where those things come into play. Is, hey, I was guided by the AI agent that told me this. I went to my doctor's office just about a week ago, and I saw a sign inside the room that says, please be aware that we are now using AI assistants to transcribe your visit and log everything into your patient health. And there was recently a report that came out that said that, hey, we looked at this and there was 60% of this was complete nonsense, meaning the AI assistant got the transcription of the patient visit wrong. So it's like, you wouldn't think. But again, you're starting to see more of that happening, and everywhere you go now, AI is doing something on someone's behalf, and it's recording, transcribing, recommending something. So
I think we are more and more. Yeah. We are still at the stage where it has warnings all over it saying AI can make mistakes. So yeah, but I think people are starting to trust it an awful lot more. I generally read the transcripts of my meetings, and it's generally pretty good. But occasionally, let's get things wrong, or it just misses things. Things which I thought, well, hold on a minute. I'm sure we discussed that in this meeting, and it's not in the notes. And then you have to go back to the transcript to say, oh yes, we did discuss it, but for some reason the AI just ignored that entire discussion thread. So yeah, we are becoming more and more dependent on it, and I can see the use case there for Obligra. So great to hear that people are tackling that problem, and best of luck with the business. So we are going to talk about that government decision that you referred to there later on in our podcast. But before we do, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, once a week I curate a list of AWS news, which I share via my weekly AWS News Roundup. And then John picks a selection of the articles from the News Roundup that we'd like to discuss with our guest. So we have, of course, shared some articles with Stephen this week. And the first is a feature announcement about AWS Web Application Firewall announcing AI traffic monetization. Ooh, we can make money from AI traffic. Great. So, John, tell us how we can make money from AI traffic.
It's not quite that simple. And honestly, I'm not quite sure how I feel about this, if I'm honest. This is a bit icky for me, for lack of a better term. So it's not the AI bot hits you, you can magically extract Bitcoin from the AI bot, and therefore, they pay to spam you, because that would be brilliant if you could do that. I'd be all in favor of that. But it's not quite that. So the idea is there's a number of things that are behind a paywall, right? We're very familiar with paywalls because every once in a while, one of your articles gets put behind a paywall quite by accident, or a login wall, or what have you. Research articles tend to be behind paywalls, and pro tip, if ever you need access to a research article and you can find the researcher, actually email them and they'll probably send it to you directly, because they get no money from this, right? This is all publishers. But every so often you'll need something that's behind a paywall, and AI bots are now crawling these things and finding paywalls and going, well, I can't actually get access to this information unless I pay for it, right? WAF is now giving you the option to allow that transaction to happen without a human having to go, oh, pay for that, download it, give it to my AI. The AI bot or agent is now able to request via, if you're using WAF, a way of paying for it. So you hit it, or the bot hits it, you get a 402 response, which is a reasonably new one. There's a payment required response, right? Sends it back. The AI can then, presumably as the owner, user, operator, I don't know the right terminology for that. Like, can you own an AI bot? I don't know. Has kind of pre-configured their agent to be able to make these payments. And I'd like to think that if you're doing this, you have set some payment limits so that the paywall, for a human isn't a $5 and for an AI isn't $5,000, because that you could theoretically do that, I guess. So you sort of set some sensible limits on your agent. It can then make that transaction. I think it's currently using Coinbase, which again, I don't know how I feel about that. I am a Coinbase customer. I was a Coinbase customer back in the 2017 crypto boom. when kind of everyone was doing something with crypto back then. So, I've used their facilities before. And it's got Stripe and what have you as well. But the idea is paywalled article, paywalled behind WAF. WAF can now facilitate the machine-to-machine transaction so that the bot, agent, crawler, whatever, can make that payment and then get access to that content without having to go, sorry, that's paywalled. You need to look at that one yourself. I don't quite know how I feel about that. It's a really nice feature if that's something that you as a paywalled provider need to be able to do, because just going, sorry, human, and people are less and less likely to want to actually do that themselves. I largely disagree with the concept of paywalling things anyway, because I'm one of those neo-millennial information should be free type people, but that's just because I'm that age, I think. And I feel very uncomfortable, and again, maybe it's because I'm an old fuddy-duddy at this point, with giving something other than me access to making payments for me.
Well, maybe we need Stephen's tech to record those payments that have been made by the AI agents, so that we can check those commercial decisions that are being taken out of humans' hands. What are your thoughts on this, Stephen?
I think it's interesting, the concept of machine-to-machine commerce. I think AWS really recognizing that AI agents are going to really become, economic actors. I think it's interesting. WAF really used to be about protecting the front door of an application, right? Everything was API driven. Now AWS is saying, hey, the front door may need pricing, licensing, and payment enforcement. I think what customers are going to ask is this. They're going to say, how do I know which bots are legitimate? How do I price access? What happens if an AI agent lies about its identity? How does legal define licensing terms for machine access? If, for example, when an AI system consumes your content, is that traffic marketing? Is it theft? Is it partnership, or is it revenue? I think this is a good starting point, but I think you're going to get people into a room like architects, security teams, legal teams, and product teams to figure out, okay, how do we build a governance around this? It's just another frontier of like, this is a new possibility. We now have to figure out what a blueprint looks like for this, right? Says, how does this interact with like robots, TXT, or API terms, contracts, copyrights? I think you get into this, it's cool, but I think you really get into the rub when it's like, all right, but how do we build a model around it that is just beyond security? Because now there's going to be a lot more in there. Interesting.
Yeah, contract is an interesting point, isn't it? Because, if there's a commercial transaction taking place, there has to be a contract for that, right? So do you have separate contracts for bots? How do you stop the bot operator or the bot creator from paying for your content and then republishing it, or it appearing in an LLM, and all of a sudden your intellectual property that you're trying to protect with the paywall is now available to the rest of the world without paying for it? It's it's an interesting point.
I mean, that's not a new problem, right? That's copyright theft. That's not a new problem, but it's like a lot of things, it's an enabler at scale. You could always go and pay your £5 or whatever for access to this FT article, copy and paste it, stick it to PDF on your own blog. The FT will probably sue you though, because you've kind of done that via terms of service, and because it's manual and human, sort of all the rest of it. If you get caught doing it, which is semi-likely, it's a viable scale that they could operate at a human level. If you've got millions of AI bots doing this to everybody, then it's completely unimaginable. That the scale has just gone mad. So it's not a new problem, but it's a bigger problem.
Send your legal bot into battle with their legal bot, and they can just bot fight it out, and
Yeah, who's got the more powerful bot, right?
Yeah.
Why
who's got the most tokens? Yeah.
I'm now seeing Craig Charles and Robot Wars, but that's a very British 90s reference.
Yeah, AI bot wars is the the 2030s the 2030s equivalent, I guess. But anyway, moving on from AI bot wars to our next article for this week, which is slightly less exciting, but another feature announcement for Amazon Elastic I can't even say it, put my teeth back in. Amazon Elastic Container Service, which is announcing faster service auto scaling. I think I got my container service and auto scaling mixed up in one mouthful there. Anyway, there was an article last week on 18th of June where ECS has announced faster auto scaling. John, thoughts on this? Was it slow? Was it too slow for certain use cases?
I didn't think it was slow. I didn't think it was particularly slow, but it was one of those pales in comparison to the scale of Lambda type things, right? Because Lambda's had a lot of love over the past 5 years or so, I guess. where the scale out went from that's okay, I could work with that to good grief, that's fast, because it sort of 10x'd 1 year and just went, huh? Because the evaluation windows kind of shrunk to about 10% of what they were, and it was able to bring on 10x the amount of scale, and therefore you could scale from 1 to 1,000 in a minute rather than in 10 minutes. Yeah, I'm kind of mixing my numbers, but you kind of get the point. ECS I didn't think was particularly slow to scale, and it was one of those things that I thought was just the cost of working with containers, and that they were just a little bit slower because there's just more to load, more to do, because they're just bigger, right? There's not full kernels and what have you, but there's just more going on. But this is it's a nice change, right? It's a really nice change. It's nice to see that other services are still getting love. ECS has gotten a lot of love lately anyway, because you've had ECS Anywhere is a bit old now, but you've had Express Mode and a few other bits and pieces as well. But now what we've got is a really nice change wherein I think it's specifically for Fargate. So you've got your metrics have gone down to 20 seconds instead of, I think, per minute, which is good, which as part of that has resulted in really weird numbers here, but a scale out time improved from 363 seconds to 86 seconds, which is okay. And no marketing person looked at those numbers. That's an engineering update, isn't it? It's 76% better, or 4.2 times. Okay, then. Cool, right? Faster ECS is good. Faster container workloads is good. I wonder if this will bleed into even more improvements for Lambda eventually, because Lambda, I think, runs on ECS somewhere, probably under the covers. I don't know if it does or not, but it's absolutely running in containers, and I don't know how they're kind of managing that under the covers. But it's not a massive announcement, but if you are running a containerized workload and you don't want to have to think about, we need to be able to scale out really quickly versus we need to pre-scale and all these sorts of things, this might actually help you out, because you've gone from about, what is that? 300. What's 360 seconds in church?
6 minutes.
6 minutes, isn't
about
it?
6 minutes, isn't it? Yeah. 6 minutes, about a minute and a half, right? So that's a really significant improvement in terms of scaling out. And then new task provision as well is 3 and a bit times quicker as well, right? It's now just under 2 minutes. So if you are an ECS user and your platform scales up and down quite a bit, which I know I've worked on some platforms that do, this is great, because there's not, come on. It just does it. And you don't have to think about, I need to be really jumpy with my scaling, because we have this in auto scaling environments for ASGs and what have you. You have to be quite jumpy with your scaling, because it takes 5 minutes to bring a box on. So you have to go, I need to scale based on 2 data points, which the third data point might not have supported it. So then you're kind of flapping. You will probably see a bit less flap, because you can be a little bit more conservative with when you need to scale, because it's doing it faster and you have better data points more often. So I like this, even if it is a bit dull.
Stephen, thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one, right? I think over the last couple of years, what I've seen is large customers don't trust ECS target tracking alone. They've really moved away from that. I mean, I think if you look at Netflix, DoorDash, Capital One, Disney, they're not sitting around for CPU scaling. Typically, those customers, they've moved away from target tracking. They're now doing things like scheduled scaling, predictive scaling, queue-based scaling, event-driven scaling. I think a great example of where customers have made that pivot is they moved to Kubernetes event-driven auto scaling. That's where they've kind of put it in there. They've gotten away from, we'll just scale based upon CPU percentage. Well, that's just a pain point. I think the evolution into the containers and microservices has really kind of moved into knowing the workloads, right? And moving into that. Where the rub here is that with ECS target tracking, it waits for the metric to rise, and then it waits for CloudWatch to publish and evaluate it, and then it adds an ECS. It says, hey, ECS, add a task for me. And then AWS's new 20-second ECS reduces that, but the model is still the same. It's notice the pain and then react. And while that's a great improvement for some customers, I think more mature customers in this space are probably using more of the predictive scaling events. They've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. Like I said, some of the large customers like like Disney, Netflix, HBO, I think if you were to tell them it's going to take 6 minutes for your workloads to spin up and be available, they would be like, yeah, that's not possible. We can't wait 6 minutes. We need to be sub-second, millisecond capacity. Like, it needs to move much, much faster.
Yeah, it's a fair point. The counterpoint is it might not be aimed at them, because a lot of the customers that we see in the small and medium business space, scaling at all automatically is new for them. So the fact that you've
Mhm.
got, it'll take 5 minutes, 6 minutes to scale up. Oh, that's pretty good. Oh, by the way, it's now
Mhm.
going to take 2 minutes. Fantastic. It's target tracking is something I've historically shied away from on the basis of it takes far too long to scale, which is my
Mhm.
point around making your scaling kind of jumpy. So you've actually
Mhm.
gone with simple scaling rather than target tracking, because you think target
Mhm.
tracking, great, I can just say, sit at 70% CPU and handle it for me, versus the slightly older way where it was,
Mhm.
if you get above 50% scale up,
Yeah.
but then hold it until you're below 30%, or,
Mhm.
numbers can change, because that way
Right.
you can be a little bit more jumpy with your scaling, because you've got up, and then we'll hold for a bit until everything calms down.
Yeah.
But like I say, hopefully this is for people that, if you're already using target tracking, it's good enough, it'll get better.
Mhm.
And if you're not, and you're doing what we've done kind of in a few places, and you've gone simple scaling because it's
Mhm.
not been quick enough, then maybe it's something to go and look at again. But yeah, if you've got, you need to be done ahead of time, this absolutely doesn't replace scheduled scaling.
Yeah. I used to always say, listen, is that when you're talking about auto scaling and capacity and things like that, are you auto scaling policies that are tuned for just your today traffic or yesterday traffic? Now, for a lot of customers, like you mentioned, they still have scaling policies that are built for things like steady state web applications. That's perfectly fine. They may not be ready for things like bursty AI workflows, event storms, and background processing spikes and things like that, right? So kind of where you are in terms of like your specific workload. I would say your mileage will vary based upon your specific workload. Maybe not, again, every customer I would talk to is not the size of a Netflix. They probably are running like maybe 4 or 5 web apps in their internal environment. And they want faster scaling and things like that. Perfect for them. But I think when you start getting into it, like underneath this, like now that we start seeing more AI workflows, is like this is going to become more of a consistent norm. It needs to be faster, right? It'll be interesting to see where things go over the next 6 to 12 months. I used to say 24 months because that's typically whenever we'd say customers would kind of have an application evolution. Now they're like trying to evolve every 6 to 8 months. And like, oh no, it's 12, 24 months is too long.
Yep. Tech is definitely moving at a faster pace than it ever did before.
Yeah, extremely fast.
So, yeah. Anyway, let's move on to our third article for this week. And it's another feature announcement. We have feature announcements coming thick and fast from AWS at the moment, it seems. This is the announcement that AWS Secrets Manager has introduced safe secrets handling in the agent toolkit for AWS. So kind of back on AI again. Agent toolkit, something we've been experimenting with here. Although I think I've broken my connection to the agent toolkit right now. That's something I need to get back on and fix again. It was working before I rebuilt my machine, and now it isn't. So anyway, John, what are your thoughts on Secrets Manager with safe secrets handling in agent toolkit?
I like this a lot because, one, we have an actual customer requirement that I've just got, brilliant, I can use that because it is part of the delivery, and I don't have to build it, which is fantastic. But I saw it and thought, Amazon has finally solved the standing joke was, if you can't afford an API key for something, ask Copilot, it's got one. Because someone's put it in code and it's been trained on it, and you've got, because as a private repo, it'd be fine. And you put an API key in code. So, that was the standing joke, was if you can't afford a Google Maps key, I think it was, ask Copilot for one, it'll give you one. And this is kind of solving for that. Okay, because what it's saying now is you can tell your coding agent, and they're better than they used to be, admittedly. Like Gen 1s of these things were quite poor at this. They are a lot better than they used to be at working out that that's a secret string, that's an API key, that's a password, that shouldn't be in your code base, I'm not going to put it in your code base, all those sorts of things. This is now giving you a proper way of handling it within the AWS ecosystem. So saying, here is Secrets Manager, here is kind of where you're supposed to put secrets. I'd like to see SSM secure parameters in this as well because they're cheaper. But it makes sense that they started with Secrets Manager because parameter store is one of those funny services that they don't really talk about that much, but it does almost exactly the same things as Secrets Manager, but for no money rather than 50 cents a secret. Don't ask me why, but that's just kind of the deal. So it makes sense that they've started with this one. And you can now say via the agent toolkit, don't go and put things in code, put them here, that's where they live, you pull them from there, and you don't have this kind of finagling with your third-party tools of, like, I don't know, your 1Password or your Bitwarden CLIs or whatever to pull it from your kind of local password manager or what have you. It's just there, and it's behind the agent toolkit, and you can just tell your coding agent how to handle it. So I like this, and this, as I say, this solves for the ask Copilot for a maps key, because they're now obfuscated properly.
Stephen, your thoughts on this one?
I think this is a really great feature. I've not had a chance to dive into this one yet. I think every customer is really trying to get AI assisted development. There's no doubt about that. I think the moment you bring agents into engineering workflows, you run into a lot of nasty questions. I mean, how do you let agents do the useful work without handing them the keys, just with unwillingly, right? I think security teams, what I've heard is they're going to say, listen, we're not going to accept that the AI saw the production password and we trust it. I think this feature gets around some of that a little bit. I think it's a really cool feature. I think the enterprise blockers never really been like whether AI can write the code. I think the blockers, whether AI can participate in real engineering workloads without leaking secrets. I think that's the fear everyone has, right? Is the AI can look at the secret. So I think this is going to be interesting. I think because you see a lot of customers, they're already playing with tools like Cursor, Claude Code, Codex, Copilot, they're doing stuff with workflows. I think this is a great feature to have. It'll be interesting to see where it goes. I'm excited about playing with it because I've not had a chance to get hands on to it. But I said, sure, why not? Let's introduce something that allows developers to have more of that capability without figuring out how they're going to work around the secrets part or passwords to a database or something they may need to retrieve from Secrets Manager. I think the enthusiasm is definitely there. I think it's going to be a lot of questions like, can I print secrets? Can I commit secrets to a repo? Can I capture sensitive values? Can we use the agentic developer platforms? What type of guardrails do we need? It's interesting. I think it's awesome, to be honest.
One thing I did notice was missing from this article, I think, on scanning it, is the last paragraph mentions that this skill is available for all agent harnesses supported by the agent toolkit for AWS, including Claude Code, Codex, and Cursor. No mention of Kiro, which is their own product, which I thought was a little bit strange. I know AWS is a big organization, and sometimes one team doesn't know what the other one is doing. But this is an article specifically about AWS and the agent toolkit. You'd have thought they'd have mentioned Kiro in there, would they not?
Mm-hmm.
You'd have thought, but I've seen this in a couple of places where when the agent toolkit first came out and they started deprecating the MCPs pointed you to the GitHub repo and it had nothing for Kiro, nothing. And we're quite hard into Kiro because you think logically it's the one to use for AWS, but apparently not. Apparently they're just sort of going, well, we don't own this space, but we want people to be able to consume these things and do it properly, and them giving us money, but another agent tool doing it, fine, whatever. It might be, and this is pure speculation, but it might be sort of a reaction to, not that Kiro bad, but people using things like Claude Code and what have you. Those other tools tend to bias into not AWS for deploying things. I think Claude has a habit of biasing into Vercel as much as it can possibly manage. So it might be a case of, well, we want all of these other tools that are good at giving other people money to try and give us some money.
Yeah, I just thought it was a bit of a glaring omission that you'd have thought they'd have mentioned their own tool in their own article. But yeah,
I mean, to be fair, what it says is, plugins are available for Claude Code, Codex, and Cursor. For everything else, you can do it through the MCP. So you can still kind of do it. But yes, I would have expected a add to Kiro button.
Yeah. Anyway, not sure why it's missing, but it does seem to be. Let's move along to our next article for this week. And this is an article on Yahoo Finance. Whose name off the top of my head, not Bezos anymore, is it? What's his name? Amazon CEO. Come on, help me out here. Jassy, that's the one. Yeah. So Andy Jassy, after pouring $8 billion into Anthropic, speculating that he helped trigger the government crackdown on the pulling of the Fable 5. Was it Fable 5 model?
Fable 5
last weekend. So this article's on Yahoo Finance, but if you read any IT press, this was all over the IT press last weekend, that after the Mythos LLM being kind of released into almost like a private preview into a bunch of trusted organizations, Fable 5 was the kind of public-facing version of that model. And the reason the Mythos one was released into a kind of private preview is because it was so powerful, they believed that it could kind of break into anything, pretty much. So there was a watered down version of it, Fable 5, which was released. And then a week later, the US government decided, no, that one shouldn't be out there either. Yeah, this article is kind of speculating.
Well, it wasn't that it shouldn't be out there at all. It was that it shouldn't be out there for anyone other than Americans, which is a very American government standpoint to take, right? Because that's kind of every government standpoint is, here's a thing run by a company that's in our jurisdiction. Our people can use it, but no one else can. And what was particularly interesting about this, because I read Corey Quinn's write-up on this one, was you now have to have disaster recovery planning that accounts for letters from the Treasury of Commerce as a threat vector, which I found very amusing. But the problem wasn't that it wasn't allowed out at all. The problem was it was only allowed out for American citizens, including employees of the American company, Anthropic, who aren't American citizens, on green cards and whatever, visas and what have you. They weren't allowed to use it either. And Anthropic correctly realized that there was no technical way of complying with that without breaching various other laws. So they just shut it off completely.
Which is a challenge if you're building on these things, as people are rapidly, as these things emerge, people adopt them and start to build on them. And if this is a trend which we could potentially be repeated in the future, how do you work around that, Stephen?
I don't really know. What I find so confusing about this story is just kind of what's been happening, the uncomfortable relationship I have with these, Anthropic and the U.S. government. And I'm all for that there needs to be legislation and regulation that happens inside the United States Congress. But when the White House decides that they want to basically decide that they have the power to pull a model because of something that they say, well, probably threatens national security, it kind of puts something into question. I know Dario Amodei has been saying for years is that these AI models are very scary. They're very scary. They're very scary. And everybody was like, yeah, okay, that's fine. They finally developed something that probably was truly very scary. And then they basically have the White House decides to pull it. I always feel like sometimes the government shouldn't get involved in product releases from private companies. I think the market needs to decide. Customers need to decide either this is something they want to adopt or this is something very risky. I think this is also where legislation needs to come in from Congress, not from the White House. So I don't really see this playing out very well if this is going to be the model that we're now going to adopt is, sorry, we're going to release it only for Americans. Sorry, we can only have it for US citizens. Sorry, we have all these limitations, restrictions on here, but they're not actual laws. This is just basically done by executive decisions, which is very scary because again, I'm very much of a free market idealist where it's like, if you release a product, it should be viewed by the private sector as something they want to adopt or something that is just crazy, buggy, where no one was ever going to adopt it. I don't really understand it. It's just funny and wacky at the same time.
So I'm a bit less free market ideologist because I'm a British version of a capitalist, which means by American standards, I'm a socialist. I'm very not, but by American standards, I'm a socialist. This whole concept of it's got to come from this part of the legislature versus that part, it's not a uniquely American thing because I mean the British court system has concepts of things like super injunctions, which is you can't talk about it and you can't talk about the fact that you can't talk about it. So these are these are not kind of uniquely American things, but because America just has all of these companies and makes lots of noise in various press and lots of the Western world is kind of US centric in terms of the media sphere. We hear a lot more about there's been an executive order, there's been a this, there's been a that, and therefore it's been banned. I don't know how I feel about governments banning specific things within a technology center. I get it on the basis. I mean, national security is a bit of a big hammer to hit things with because we don't like that. National security banned.
Yeah,
but the British government is no better. If anything, ours is arguably quite a lot worse. Look at the various things that's going on over here at the minute, and I'm not going to get into that. Yeah, it's icky.
Well, listen, it's also listen, from our side over here too, is also very confusing as a technologist that's in it. And of course, if you look at kind of the political landscape as you look at other people, you look at other organizations, you look at customers, they're asking for regulation, legislation, some sort of governance, agreed upon government framework around artificial intelligence. Many people I speak to, everyone agrees there needs to be some legislation and regulation in that particular space. Then you see, like with the Department of Defense, then all of a sudden pulling in Anthropic saying, if you don't give us free reign to these models, we're going to list you as a supply chain risk, which then means every agency in the US government that has any dealings with any type of use or product that relates to Anthropic has to be banned. So on one hand, they're saying we should ban it. On the other hand, we're then pulling Anthropic in saying you can't release your models. And it's really just very odd because you look and you see that there's a lot of dysfunction in terms of how this is really being handled. So you kind of are like, I'm very confused as to kind of what's happening right now. Just my take on it. It's very difficult to really see what's happening.
What do you think the risk really is? Is it, other countries are going to be able to hack into US systems
That'd be the fear.
using these models?
That would be the fear. So the first couple of paragraphs kind of go into this is Jassy told Treasury Secretary that Amazon researchers had used Fable 5 to obtain information that could potentially be used in cyber attacks. Shortly afterwards, it was banned. So that's really kind of generic sort of take on it, but that's going to be the general fear. Is it's powerful enough that it could cause actual problems to national infrastructure, for argument's sake. But these things are particularly well hardened to start with.
But why did Andy Jassy need to pick up the phone and call the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent? Why wouldn't he just call Dario Amodei and say, look, hey, listen, we have found this, and this for the benefit of our customers and your customers. Let's kind of have a moment where our researchers can share with you what they found and then give you kind of a threat assessment based upon our initial findings. I don't know why that there needs to be a phone call to the Treasury or to any type of government agency saying, please stop this from being released. I'm sure that they all have lunch together in Davos. I'm sure that every CEO at this level all communicates with each other. I don't feel like there needs to be a phone call to the federal government telling them on behalf of us, please stop this product from launching.
Well, we don't know that there was, because I think this is speculation in the article, but there's no smoke without fire, as they say with these things.
Right,
so,
right.
It's just, I think what you described is really where the whole Project Glasswing thing came from, where they kind of went, "Ooh, this seems a bit dangerous. Maybe we should just all figure out together how we're going to control these things and put guardrails around it and everything else." So they, put Mythos into Project Glasswing and then launched Fable 5. It's like, oh, hold on a minute, isn't that not the same thing? Or maybe, like, an equally dangerous version of it.
We see what you were trying to do there. We see what you were trying to do.
We just gave it a different name and launched it anyway. So
hope nobody would notice.
Yeah. Well, it turns out somebody did. Anyway, on that note, let's move along to our final article for this week. And this is an article on Tech Times, all about GitHub's AI agent crisis, forcing Microsoft to tap AWS as outages break enterprise SLAs. So this is all about, I'll just read the subheading actually, because it explains it better than I can. But use of AI coding agents has driven up commits 14 times in a year, pushing GitHub into its rival's cloud to stay online. So this is basically Microsoft going to AWS saying, AWS, please, we need some capacity to keep running GitHub because we've run out. As I mentioned earlier, I think I'm part of the problem here, although certainly not part of the 14xing the GitHub commits. But these tools are now enabling unskilled developers such as myself. Happy to hold my hand up and say I've never developed any software in my life prior to using Kiro. All of a sudden, I'm now pushing stuff into GitHub repos for people to review. That gives us a problem because we're creating loads of software that we can't actually get into production because we can't review it as quick as people can develop it. But apparently, it's also giving GitHub a problem because the capacity is just going way beyond what they had forecast. So, thoughts on this, John?
You are absolutely part of the 14x because your increase is 100 times. It's 100%. You've gone from nothing
exactly,
to a lot.
Yeah. I just meant I am part of it. I'm happy to own up to that. Just not a material part of it in the global scheme of things. But
I mean, to be fair, you're probably no more or less part of the problem than I am because I was probably committing as much before AI as you are now, if that makes sense, right?
Yep.
I was active developer using the platform, kind of all the rest of it, and now you've gone to sort of my baseline level and mine has just gone whomph. And I'm principal engineer as the kind of the headline of this podcast says, which means that because of the way that sort of our firm is structured, I am both an individual contributor and a team lead and a function lead and sort of all the rest of it. So I'm doing a reasonable amount of actual work as a developer would call it, as well as a lot of not code related work, right? But my output has gone through the roof. It's gone absolutely ballistic for less input time. I think this is just the case everywhere. I did a tiny little bit of Googling about this, because I think I spoke about this last week and possibly the week before about this kind of magic roundabout of people renting data center capacity from each other. And it's just another element of this. So I did finally manage to get the information out there. And the one that I was remembering badly was Apple, that runs their own data centers, also rent space from Google Cloud. Google Cloud was renting space from SpaceX. SpaceX is now kind of the only making any money from this. And I think Anthropic and Google, other bits of Google and Reflection and various AI companies, I don't know that Amazon is yet, are also renting from SpaceX. So basically what's happening is lots of people that weren't running data centers or compute before are running compute before, and hyperscalers, even they're struggling, right? Because GitHub is on Azure because Microsoft owns it, and they're struggling to keep up. So everyone is just struggling with the sheer amount of power that's needed. And I don't see this going away anytime soon. Historically, it was something that we kind of were a little bit naughty, a little bit cheeky, mocking some of the local Azure user group chapters around how they would consistently run out of capacity in various regions. And it never happens in AWS. It's happening in AWS now. You could genuinely every so often go, I can't have, and it's not even the esoteric instance types, right? You'd expect, a C6IN to occasionally not be available because it's a weird type. It's not even that. We're seeing unavailability in the London region for core services sometimes in weird bits of the infrastructure. So this is not getting better anytime soon.
So what's the solution? What's going to happen, Stephen? What's your prediction?
Well, listen, I think capacity has always been an issue within the hyperscalers, within AWS. I think they've got it down to a science of how they can absorb and scale large amounts of requests per day. I think they've proven they can do this. I think Microsoft has definitely grown in size and capacity. I think the science is still scaling and capacity management. We used to always say capacity management, capacity planning was always a science. You always tried to get it right when you worked on-prem and data centers. I think now with the cloud, people think, oh, there's limitless supply, there's limitless capacity. Yes. But I think if you look at the article itself here, it says that they basically had 9 major events. They said 9 service degraded incidents in May of 2026. So even with AWS, they're not 100, they're not 5 nines of availability as much as they want to. There's been outages. I think this is something that all hyperscalers are going to have to figure out how to deal with capacity management, capacity planning. I think you kind of see that this is really something where you say, look, I mean, this it has downstream effects. It's going to be interesting, right? So you just got to get better at scaling.
GitHub doesn't help itself. So the article does sort of go on to explain that GitHub was built, a very long time, 18 years ago now, in 2008, Ruby on Rails, and it's still, the core of it is still a very big monolith, which is not helping it. But unpicking that versus just, can I have some more compute, please, is a very different sort of ball game. I was at, ages ago now, actually, I was at a green software event where the argument was, if everyone had acted the same as hardware manufacturers in terms of like firmware efficiency, because they are utterly ruthlessly efficient with resource utilization on firmware. If everyone acted like that, we wouldn't have a capacity problem at all. But no one does, because, as you say, people act like the cloud is limitless because you just sort of go, I have a bigger one, and then you can stop thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable paying for the headroom, even though I don't need it.
It's the comfy space. It's the I'll just 3x it to what it actually needs to be, because then I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
I
mean, there's a lot of factors affecting capacity at the moment, isn't there? I mean, you mentioned power, John, and data center space, but of course, there's also Ramageddon and the shortage of GPUs. And of course,
that's been a thing since about 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all that does is push the price up. So, that's where I can see this going. I mean, Stephen, we were talking before we came on air about the changes to Kiro overage credits, etc. I'm not sure if we haven't got an article on that this week, and I haven't spent any time studying it. But I wonder if that's a kind of a stealth price rise for AI coding assistants. And I think at the moment, we're all getting these things very cheaply in comparison to what they cost to run. So if you're using Claude Code, Codex, Kiro, or Amazon's desktop assistant, Amazon Quick, etc., they're not particularly expensive in the grand scheme of things versus the the value they deliver, but also the cost that we know that it takes to run these things. So I think we're just going to see all the prices going up, and it's things like this they're going to get pointed at. So this is why your GitHub subscription has gone up, because we needed to buy extra capacity.
I mean, GitHub itself is not terribly expensive either, and historically sort of hasn't. It's got cheaper, actually, in truth, because the team plan, which is the entry level paid for version, is only $4 a head. That's not terribly expensive for what you get, and the free tier is incredibly compelling. So it's the Kira overage change. Just for a quick intro, so we haven't spoken about it on pod, and we don't have an article for it, but the short version is. It used to be in arrears, so you would just use them and then pay for exactly what you'd used over your tier amount, and now you prepay them. And I think you prepay them in sort of packs of them, so in like round numbers. So yes, it is kind of a little bit of a stealth increase, because you have to buy it and then you might not use all of what you've paid for, as opposed to actually paying for exactly what you've used. So maybe there's a bit of buffer spend in there. I don't think that's the view, because I think lots of people have said, I would rather prepay for this, and can I get a cheaper rate if I prepay kind of deal, because overage credits were 4 cents per credit rather than the effective 2 that you get at the normal rate. So your $20 buys you 1,000, therefore that's about 2 cents a credit, and they're 4 cents a credit in overages. And people were saying, well, I'd quite happily just buy another 500 if you can do that for 3 cents a credit. It's, that kind of sort of thing. So I don't know if the pricing is any different or whether that will come. So maybe it's a stealth increase, maybe not. But everything is going to have to get more expensive, because the only solve for this is build more data centers.
Or, build more data centers, or repatriate workloads to on-premises data centers, which is kind of more data centers. But
flavors of the same solve.
Do you think it's going to drive more of a distrust in the cloud, because everyone's just been like, throw everything in the cloud? Are these sort of things going to change that a little bit, do you think?
Well, I think the GitHub story is a really good warning that just AI productivity doesn't stay inside the particular IDE, right? It spills into CI/CD, it spills into repositories, storage, security scanning, approval workflows. So there's much more that it reaches into that increases the cost overall. It's not just one particular service. It consumes all of these services in a data center. I think to your point is that customers may say it's going to be very cost prohibitive to run this in AWS or in Microsoft Azure. We may be better off building our own data centers. I always kind of say good luck with that, because again, the hardware and everything to go back on-prem is very, very expensive. Most of those people who are very, very hardware specific in terms of building out a data center, remember, most customers who moved out of data centers 5-10 years ago don't have the infrastructure teams that they used to. They've all went to go work somewhere else. You're going to have to recruit people like that to come in-house for you to then say, we're going to build out these AI data centers. And you're going to really struggle for resources, because now they're consumed by people like NVIDIA or RapidScale or you name your provider that basically runs these things 24/7, builds these things out. You're going to have a hard time recruiting talent like that. Not everybody has that proficiency in-house. The alternative is that you're just going to have to be subject to the fees that are going to be increased in the cloud. So it's in Azure and AWS, is that we used to think that the more people consume these services, the cheaper it will traditionally get. That's traditionally been true. However, I think with AI is that with the way that the economics or the tokenomics of things are going to work out, is that we're going to see probably some price increases for things like provision capacity, product availability, service capacity. I think those things may bleed into customers end up paying more. I hope not, but it probably will go that way.
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to see customers paying more, but I think to your point, Stephen, it's still going to be more cost effective than doing it yourself. The cost of these things double. If you need to use them, then you'll accept paying the price, because it's still going to be a lot more cost effective than trying to build these things yourself. So.
I am just going to issue a very slight correction on my statement earlier. Just before we go any further on this one, it's not in GitHub. It's not entirely in Azure. It's about 40% in Azure. So this is a stopgap. This is not Microsoft running out of capacity. This is GitHub hasn't migrated quickly enough. I still think the overall point stands in that everyone's running out of capacity. Prices are going to go up, and this is not going to end anytime soon.
No,
absolutely not. Cool. Well, on that note, we have reached the end of our time for Season 5, Episode 23 of Logicast. So it just remains for me to thank you, Stephen, for your third time appearing as a guest on the podcast. It's been great to have you on and great to hear your insights in what is going on in the world of cloud computing and AI. So thank you very much for joining us again. And Jon, as always, thank you for braving the what we are referring to as a heat wave, but what most people just call summer, to share your insights with us as well. So,
are we going to get going on that? No, that's a very different podcast. But bring an Australian to the UK in a heatwave, bring an American to the UK in a heatwave, and they just melt. It's not the same.
Well, different types of heat, but that's yes, like you say, a whole different conversation. So, as I said, we have reached the end of our time for Season 5, Episode 23 of Logicast. So, if you have made it this far, thank you very much for listening. If you've enjoyed it, please give us a like, give us a follow. We are available to download wherever you download your podcasts. And if you'd like to see the wonderful, colorful backgrounds that we're all sporting, then you can check us out on the Logicata YouTube channel as well. So that's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of Logicast for you. See you again next time.